The reading for the fourth Sunday after Pentecost is from Genesis, the 25th chapter, which can be found on page 19 in the Bibles in the pews. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. And afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore him. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to them and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. The word of the Lord.
Now we leap forward till the boys are both in their later years, and they're about to be reconciled. I'm going to tell you the whole story, but we're reading the reconciliation. This is found in Genesis 33. You may remain seated. Now Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maids. He put the maids with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on ahead of them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. When Esau looked up and saw the women and children, he said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the maids drew near, they and their children, and bowed down. Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And finally Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down. Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company that I met?" Jacob answered, "To find favor with my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob said, "No, please, if I find favor with you, then accept my present from my hand. For truly to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Since you have received me with such favor, please accept my gift that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have everything I want." So he urged him, and he took it. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, so today we have this story of Jacob and Esau. They are the grandchildren of Abraham. Remember, it's Abraham to whom God made the promise that you will have as many children as there are stars in the sky. You'll have as many children as there is sand on the sea. And then Abraham's wife didn't have a child till she was almost 100. But the child was named Isaac, and Isaac had these two boys, Jacob and Esau. And we almost always say their names in that order, even though Esau was born first. When they were born, you heard from the first Bible story that they came out, Esau came out first, but Jacob was holding on to his heel. And so his name, Jacob's name, means the supplanter, or the one who tries to take from the other. Jacob is kind of a trickster. He makes me think back on my college days. I was part of a group of friends who loved practical jokes. We each loved playing them better than we liked being the recipient. One weekend, I was out of town on a mission, and I got back to my dorm, and everything I owned, my bed, my guitar, my bookshelf, all my textbooks, all my clothes, were down in the lobby of the dorm with a big sign that said, "Welcome back." Yeah, and then they hadn't arranged to be around to help me put it back. But I got even, because I went out and I bought some packets of Kool-Aid and opened up the shower heads and put the Kool-Aid inside. Good, huh? I could tell who had taken their showers. Well, Jacob and Esau were probably brothers like that, but it was a little trickier than that, because Jacob was not a practical joker. He actually was out to take Esau's place. And so in the first story, you heard how Jacob had a stew, and Esau came in from hunting and working in the fields, and he was exhausted, and he said to Jacob, "Let me have some stew." And Jacob said, "Well, I'll give you some stew if you'll trade me your birthright for it." Now, the birthright meant that the oldest one gets 2 parts of the inheritance to 1 part for all of the other boy children, right? So Esau would get double of Isaac's wealth, and for a pot of stew, or for a bowl of stew, Jacob bought Esau's birthright, because Esau, you heard Esau say, what is my birthright worth since I'm dying of hunger, right? I've felt that way. So then the boys went on. Esau probably had some resentment toward Jacob for this. And the days came when Isaac, their dad, was on his deathbed. Now, Isaac loved Esau best, and Rebekah, their mother, loved Jacob best. And so Isaac called Esau in and said, "Esau, I'd like you to make me some meat, a meat dish from something you've caught," right? And so Esau went out to do that, but Rebekah overheard. And Rebekah said, "Jacob, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go out and you're going to slaughter 2 young goats and bring them to me." So Jacob did that. And Rebekah made a stew like what Isaac wanted from Esau. And she gave it to Jacob, and she said, "Bring this into your father and get your father's blessing." That was the big deal, the dad's blessing at the end of his life. And so Jacob said, "But Mom, Esau's a really hairy guy, and I am not hairy. So if my father says, 'Well, you don't sound like Esau, hold out your arm so I can feel it,' he's going to know." And so Rebekah took the goat skins from the goats that she had made food out of and put them on Jacob's arms so that he would feel furry, and probably on his chest. And so Jacob went in to his father and said, "I'm here with the dish you've asked me to prepare." And Isaac said, "Well, you sound like Jacob. You don't sound like Esau. Let me feel you to make sure you're Esau." And he felt the goat skin, and he said, "Oh, you are Esau, so here's my blessing." And he pronounced a beautiful blessing of land and wealth and children and heritage on Jacob. And Jacob left with that blessing. And Esau came a few minutes later, and he said, "Father, here's the dish you asked me to prepare." And Father said, "You sound like Esau. I just gave your blessing to Jacob." And Esau begged begged for a blessing. And Isaac said, I blessed your brother with everything. May God give you the dew of heaven, the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you. Nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers. And may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. That was Jacob's blessing. Here's the second blessing that Esau got. See, away from the fatness of the earth shall your home be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you break loose, you shall break his yoke from your neck. Not exactly the best blessing in the world. And Esau was outraged, and Rebekah said, Jacob, your brother is angry enough so that you need to leave because he'll kill you. So Jacob left, and he was gone for many, many years. And then God told him to reconcile with Esau. And so he sent his servants out to see where Esau was, and the servants came back and said, well, Esau is out there, but he's got 400 people with him. And Jacob said, he's, going to war with me. So Jacob prepared a gift for Esau. And the gift that Jacob prepared for Esau was 200 female and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female and 10 male donkeys. That's a fine little gift, isn't it? Pretty generous, but Jacob was still worried about Esau's plans, and so originally he divided his company into two parts, and he sent one direction and one the other, so that if Esau came upon them and wanted to kill them, he would only have half the group. But when it came time to actually meet, you heard that part. Jacob put all of his possessions in increasing order of their importance. So the animals, then the maids with their children, and then Leah, his first wife. I'm going to talk about Leah in a minute. And then Rachel and Joseph, his second wife, and his beloved wife and son. And to his surprise, Esau wanted a reconciliation. Now Jacob wanted a reconciliation too. And what brought the change in Jacob that made him seek this? Well, two things happened to Jacob in this meantime. Jacob, the trickster, was tricked himself. He went to find a wife, and he saw a young woman, Rachel, a distant relative of his, and he fell in love with her. So he went to Rachel's father, Laban, and he said, I really want to marry your daughter, Rachel. And Laban said, well, if you work for me for 7 years, I'll let you marry Rachel. So Jacob worked for Laban for 7 years. The wedding day came. Jacob is filled with anticipation. The wedding happened. He went away with Rachel, he thought, his wife. And when he lifted the veil from her face, he realized that he had actually been married to her older sister, Leah, whom he did not love, and who was not nearly as beautiful as Rachel. And so Jacob, the trickster, was tricked himself. And so he said to Laban, his father-in-law, well, I must marry Rachel. And so he worked for Rachel another 7 years and married Rachel 14 years. And then Jacob and his father-in-law had a couple more little go-arounds about cattle and stuff. But Jacob ended up a very rich man, partly by his own wisdom. But he ended up with these two wives, one whom he really loved and one whom he really did not love. And these wives both bore him children. Rachel, the beloved one, actually only ever had 2 children, but at the time of our story, she has only Joseph. Jacob also partnered with each of his wives' maidservants. Each wife wanted to have the bigger cotillion of family. And so he ended up, Jacob did, with 12 children. Now, being tricked, that's the first thing that happened to him. The second big thing that happened to him happened the night before he had his reconciliation with Esau. He was in the desert by himself in the night, and some man came and started wrestling with him. And he wrestled with this man all night long. Neither of them prevailed, or neither of them was winning, and the other person put out Jacob's hip socket, his hip joint. And at the end, it said that Jacob prevailed over, it turns out, God. The person he was wrestling with was God. And God, in that moment, at the end of that wrestling match, gave Jacob a new name. No longer was he the supplanter, the trickster. He became Israel, a name we know very well. And he became Israel, which means may God prevail. And he became a faithful follower of God. His life turned around. And he became a follower of God. And more than that, he became the father of the men who would become the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel. A key part of everything that happens after this in the Old Testament is this 12 tribes of Israel. That's okay. And they became the leaders of what became the nation or the people of Israel. Now, why do we care about this long, kind of convoluted story? Well, I'll tell you. It's because, like Jacob, we each have things in our lives that kind of have a hold of us. Jacob was a dishonest person, really, for much of his life. And we all have stuff in our lives that we wish we didn't have. Sins that maybe only we know about. What the book of Hebrews calls the sin that clings so close. That one thing that you know you should get rid of or stop doing, but you just can't because you don't really want to. Reese's peanut butter cups, right? That thing. And what the story of Jacob tells us is that having a thing like that does not stop us from being loved and nurtured and chosen by God. God is willing to wrestle with you to help you overcome whatever it is that holds you back in your walk of faith. God is willing to come alongside you and give you strength and courage, give you the passion to let go of whatever it is that's holding you back. It might be that you're a trickster like Jacob was, that you're always looking for your own advantage. It might be that, like many of us, you consume more than you need to consume. You don't care for the earth. It might be that you find it really easy to tell a fib. It might be that you're unhappy, unthankful, ungrateful. Every one of us has stuff. And the story of Jacob tells us that God knows our stuff. And whatever that stuff is, God is right there with you to work it out in your life. Now, when I say this and when I talk about sin, I feel that I always must say, remember that we aren't ridding ourselves of sinfulness so that God will love us better. God already completely and totally loves us. God accepts us, but God invites us to grow in faith, to change, and to let faith change us, to be reconciled to God, and to be reconciled to one another. Here's the deal. The story of Jacob is really the story of God. Somewhere in the plan of God, this slippery fellow named Jacob lived somewhere in God's plan. And God used him to carry out the promise that God had made to Abraham. And let me assure you, somewhere in the plan of God lives you. I live in the plan of God. Katie lives in the plan of God. You live in the plan of God. Every one of you has a place in that plan, and God is ready to fight beside you, to stay in that plan, to do what God calls you to do, because that is what the story of Jacob is about. So this week, look for a place where you find yourself fitting in to God's plan. A place where you know that God is at work, and trust that God is at work. Amen.